Inside those reactors as the electric company continues to clean up the site. Wrapped in layers of protection, you see him there. Chang ventured through Fukushima to see the new technology being used to restore the power plant. And joining us now is Roger. You're safe, right?
Supposedly I'm safe.
Of course, you did have layers and layers on.
I went through a number of radiation tests after the visit, and
Yeah.
so I'm pretty much clear.
So the article is really interesting. We were talking earlier, and one of the things that I had never really considered is you sort of imagine what it must be like inside that plant after all this time. But you were really descriptive, and also really descriptive about the power of the natural disaster that caused this. I think we forget. We saw the pictures. So go over it. Like, what was it like in there? What did you see?
It was a little frantic. We had 10 minutes to go in there, and initially what hit me was it looked kind of like any other warehouse initially in there, but as you walk further in and you look into the pool, where you see the fuel rods, some of them melted, just this clump of radioactive material, then you start to freak out a little bit. You start to realize, oh my God, this is one of the worst nuclear disasters, and I'm standing right on top of it.
And you were in the area that you were permitted to go in.
Yes.
Because the damage in other areas is way worse.
Right, this is one of the problem spots, but not the worst radioactive hotspots on the facility. We were on the top level of the reactor. It's really the bottom level near the core where things are really, really bad. I mean, you couldn't survive a minute in that area. And so, right where we were, it was somewhat safe, but again, it's a 10-minute time limit, and they had to monitor the radioactive levels there constantly.
Wow.
So, what is some of the technology that they're using there?
So it's a vast array of robots. In fact, they don't even like to call them robots, sort of unmanned or autonomously driven vehicles. Remotely driven vehicles. So it's sort of a number of robots, some that are sort of on top, scavenging and looking for radioactive levels on the top. The real issue is the core of the reactor and actually figuring out what the problems are inside. Because 8 years now, it's been 8 years, and they really don't have a great idea of what's down there, how bad that problem is. And so really just this past month, in February, they finally sent a robot to, for the first time, touch one of the pebbles down there. And keep in mind, if you make the wrong move, you disturb the area down there, you could theoretically cause another explosion. And so it's like the worst game of operation ever.
And what I got from this is that they really don't know what they're dealing with, right? And so they're making these robots, because you can't send humans down there, but even the robots are affected by the environment. And it's sort of like a really expensive game of like, we're gonna make this thing and then cross our fingers and hope that it works. And then you've got really expensive robots that die like after an hour.
Exactly. The Scorpion was one of the more high-profile robots. It had like a little arm at the back that articulated with cameras. It was supposed to be in there for about 10 hours. It died 2 hours into the mission. They spent 2.5 years working on that thing.
So, what is this underground ice wall, and how does it impact the Fukushima site?
So the ice wall was their way of sort of containing the toxic water that was leaking out of the facility. So there's both water being used to keep the rods cool now, as well as the water leaking out. And that is seeping into the ground underneath, and it's right by the water. There is groundwater flowing down from the mountains in the west. So to keep the toxic water in and the clean water out, they basically built this underground ice wall. It's fascinating because it's technology basically designed from the 1800s for mining, to create mining tunnels, and now they're using it to basically keep toxic material out of the sea.
So what about the rest of the area? I mean, can people move back there? What's going on?
So the surrounding communities are still empty. We actually sort of stopped by some of these ghost towns, and it's just kind of fascinating to see them, because we went to one retail store where some of the clothes were still the mannequins. Like it's sort of
It's like a ghost town.
It's a ghost town.
It's a time capsule.
It's an imprint of what happened, what things were like 8 years ago. People had to flee. 160,000 people had to flee. Most of them still aren't back yet.
Yeah, I spent some time when I was at CNN living in Japan, and one of the things that I was struck by is how hard it is for example, the food that used to come from the region, which they have now deemed safe, but a lot of people are still like, I'm not touching it.
Yeah.
Yes, so there's a lot of farmland, a lot of agriculture, definitely the fishing industry was huge there. A lot of that stuff isn't available as markets because people don't want to buy it there. It's still,
Yeah, Roger, really great reporting.
It's a
Thank
great
you for
story.
great story, great accompanying article, and the video is remarkable as well. Thank you for stopping by.
thank you.
So you can walk.
Get reliably fast speeds in every room.
One of a major concern with this nuclear meltdown as a result of the tsunami is how much radioactive contamination has been emitted into the Pacific Ocean. Right? And just listening to a lecture from scientists in Albuquerque, New Mexico, about a month ago, who were presenting at a nuclear waste summit, they informed us that the nation state of Japan doesn't truly know to what extent or to what amount of radioactive contamination has been emitted into the Pacific Ocean. And another piece to their presentation was the 2020 Olympics. Environmental groups in Japan are trying to inform the International Olympic Committee that the games should not be held in Japan because of the threat of contaminated water. Right, so you know, again, Japan, the governmental officials are downplaying that because, of course, they want the economics of the Olympics in their country come next summer. So you know, this is a work in progress, right? And again, just to, let's see, I think this is the one that shows the spread of water contamination. So that was before the explosion. Here's what we're concerned about. There's another good National Geographic documentary that shows in 2017, you know, Japan uses seafood as a major economic industry, and the vast numbers of contaminated fish and other species that they're finding in the ocean, you know. And as I said, maybe not to this section, but one of the most unregulated areas in the world are our oceans. We dump all kinds of crap in there, and with very little regulatory outcomes, very few regulatory laws that look at the impact of this radioactive contamination. And when natural disasters like earthquakes, tsunamis, hurricanes, etc. occur out at sea, just imagine how that nuclear contamination is being spread around, right? You know, I love seafood, but I've been extremely concerned since this incident occurred, right? And it's something we all should be vigilant about. And it's this. Okay, so let me draw a correlation here to seconds. So this kind of gives you a time sequence, right? And it's estimated that the contaminants have reached our west coast. So let's see.
Plastic is wonderful because it's durable, and plastic is terrible because it is durable. Almost every piece of plastic ever made is still on the planet in some form or another. Plastic production globally this year is expected to be more than 300 million tonnes, half of which we'll use just once and then throw away. By 2050, when the population explodes to almost 10 billion people, it's expected that plastic production will triple. The problem with that is that today only a fraction of the plastic that we produce is recycled. The rest ends up in our environment, and it's coating our land and our oceans like a disease. Garbage thrown away in the United States can make its way to Antarctica. Plastic in our coastal waters is pulled into the centre of massive wind-driven, churning circular gyres. There are many other ocean currents also diverting the trash all around the surface of the ocean. In reality, it's just one ocean with no boundaries. Lord Howe Island is a World Heritage Site and home to migratory seabirds like the shearwaters. Seabirds are incredibly helpful because they act like an army of scientists. They travel thousands of miles across the ocean. They pick up plastic off the surface of the ocean. They bring it back to their rookeries where they feed it to their chicks, and that provides an incredible amount of scientific data in terms of where the plastic comes from, its distribution, and how it breaks up on the ocean surface. Dr. Jennifer Lavers, she's devoted her life to studying the plight of seabirds. Shearwaters are incredible birds. They migrate thousands of miles, stopping only here to breed.
Yeah, the stomach is very, very full, and if we look here, there's some very dark pieces, some very light white pieces, and if you see, as I push on this, it's absolutely rigid, completely full of plastic all the way up.
Oh, look at that.
Absolutely no doubt that this bird died as a result of that plastic. That is literally a gut full of plastic. It's quite alarming, isn't it?
Oh, it's awful.
Range of plastic types and colours. We've got everything from the blues and the reds
The
to
stomach's just filled with it. Big pieces too.
big sharp
Heavy.
pieces.
Oh wow, look at the size of that big black piece.
That is an enormous piece of plastic.
Unbelievable. Look at the size of that. Jen, I counted 234 pieces of plastic out of that one bird. Is that a record?
Not even close, unfortunately. So for the species, the record is 276 pieces of plastic inside of one 90-day-old chick. And that plastic, when we weighed it out, accounted for 15% of that bird's body mass. So that's a pretty scary statistic. If we translate that into human terms, it gets even worse. That would be equivalent to you and I having somewhere around 6 or 8 kilos of plastic inside of your stomach. It's equivalent to about 12 pizzas worth of food inside of your stomach. Quite a bit of plastic for just one little bird. The parents were trying to do the right thing. There's a lot of squid beaks in here, and this purple colour is evidence of the squid ink. It's just a shame that every now and then they got it wrong and got it wrong in a bad way. Really is quite an overwhelming thing. I do have some pretty rough days, have to go home and really wrap my mind around where do we go from here.
So this is just, the day before yesterday, or was it, I think, Norway, they found a sperm whale that had ingested 220 pounds of plastic. So, you think about it, right, and we're bombarded with plastic in this society that we live in, and we're gonna, at some point, gonna have to draw the line on the production of these contaminants as the ecosystem becomes more and more imbalanced. So we're finding situations, I thought this was an interesting example because of the mass migration of birds, right? But also, I think coral reefs are being impacted as a result of plastic in the ocean. Now you throw in the toxic mix of radioactive waste as a result of what happened at Fukushima, and it becomes alarming because the majority of our world is water-based, right? And as we see rising global, impacts on climate change, like our polar caps melting in the Arctic. Right?
Deep in southern Louisiana, the nation's first officially recognized climate change refugees.
We are the face of climate change. We bring reality to climate change by us having to make decisions between, do we stay, do we go, do we risk our health, do we risk losing this peace that we have here?
On a small, narrow strip of disappeared land, residents of Ile de Jean Charles are floundering on their own island. Residents on the island, most of whom belong to a Native American tribe, have been offered millions in federal funding to resettle somewhere else as rising sea levels slowly swallow what's left of their home. Climate change, adding to the island's natural sinking process, has already been accelerated by oil and gas extraction in the region. Residents are now left grappling with the reality, parting ways with their community.
It's something to me real steep behind, because this is where it started. This is where I was raised. This is where home was. This is where I belong.
Been living all my life and till I die.
Even if it floods over and over again.
We clean it up.
But soon, residents may not have a choice whether to stay or go. Experts warn living on the island will become virtually impossible as changes to the landscape become irreversible.
To me, it's just another symptom of the human footprint on the earth. There are so many things that we do. We overpollute, we burn too much fossil fuel, and all of this is coming back to try to help us learn that we shouldn't have done some of these things in the past.
The island, once a place to call home, is now a real-time lesson of the impacts of climate change. Lee Roseman, Associated Press.
So some real, just looking at the oceans as an example, and you know, I mean, we could teach a whole semester on the impacts to the environment. So one of the, and I forgot my study guide. So in the area of preparing for the exam, again, an emphasis on chapter 17, population, urbanization, and the environment. Is the section that you should concentrate on from for chapter 17, right? And let's see here. So the study guide has been, like I said, this first one here addresses chapter 9 on race, and then this one is from my lecture on Monday and where you should concentrate on for, okay, so this top one, you want to make sure that you go over this in preparation for the final exam. If you have any questions on this top section, right, that addresses that lecture on Monday, right? And then the focal points, like I said, the local and global environment. Examples similarly to what we saw on page 492 of our book that emphasize examples of climate change, the impact of drought on our food security in mid-America, our breadbasket of the United States, right? The resulting arid conditions have led to the destruction of 3.6 million acres by wildfires since August 2012. And again, a reference there to the Arctic ice levels and in both poles being reduced, right? Examples of some of the driest places in the world, like Brazilians that have become extremely impacted, like Brazil's rainforest, which is going up in flames, right? And the drought there, and you know, these areas have are considered the lungs of the world, that keep, you know, the carbon necessary to protect us from global warming. Right? So all these threatened areas of the world, right, are examples of, as I said on Monday, the global, an example of the global consumer class, right? Over, I think just looking at over the last weekend, Black Friday, right? The global consumer class in the United States spent $7.8 billion in that one day, right? And then throw in Cyber Monday, another $7 billion. And that's a lot of money on consumerism, right? And sometimes overconsumption results in environmental consequences. Right? The other example in your book that is an excellent one is e-waste, right? We develop all this technology, right? And some of the wiring, the chemicals that are necessary in these operational functions of current technology, right, is also a major concern. There's a good documentary on e-waste in Asia, and where the greatest populations are, like China, for example. And the vast amount of, you know, what happens to these cell phones that we carry in our hand, right? Once we turn them in, exchange them, right? How are they properly disposed of, right? Which is another plastic element, right? So all those things considered, right, in numerous capacities, again, conflict theory, our food security, that article on shrimp farms, and like drawing a correlation to what we just saw, right? Shellfish, if you like shellfish, which many of us do, crab, shrimp, oysters, clams, right? Shellfish are the most absorbent of toxic contaminants in the ocean, right? So, you know, I mean, our food security is being threatened, right? And when we consider our main elements for survival as a human race, water and food, right? Not to mention examples of genetic modification regarding our diet and how that has impacted health concerns into the future. And like we were saying the other day, we began with urbanization and industrialization, but as we fast forward to the present day, right, how disproportionately has urbanization and industrialization contributed to this current situation we find ourselves in. So moving on to chapter 8, social movements, right? As we've clearly seen in numerous examples across the duration of the semester, social change, right? Not just in environmental issues, but you know, we've seen as a result of social movements like the Me Too movement, for example, right? Empowerment of women to come forward, right? Resulting in numerous convictions of violations in sexual abuse against women, or excessive police force, how police forces across the nation are responding to concerns regarding social movement, right? The initiation of greater levels of technology, right, to help law enforcement in those capacities. And the public as well. But largely, right, as we see these issues around the environment and environmental issues, right, again resulting in social movements, a growing movement, right, across the nation, across the world. Right? As the people are convening in Madrid, Spain, you're seeing some scientific evidence that's new research that's just currently being presented, right, at that COP meeting as we speak. So these theories that come up, right, sometimes social movements result in reformation, right, reforming social institutions, reforming social organizations, even the reformation of government, right? So like all the examples of human contamination impacts regarding uranium mining having to go to Congress, right, year after year after year, finally has resulted in positive reformations regarding, say for example, in the late 1960s when this concern came to the forefront and Congress passed the National Environmental Policy Act, right? And as a result of NEPA, right, we have what happened as an example of reform as a result of NEPA in 1969 is that starting with Love Canal in New York, this toxic dump that was located in close proximity to an elementary school, where health impacts of the students raised awareness, right? And it resulted in collective behavior, a social movement emerging, petitioning Congress, right? And out of those examples came or Cesar Chavez as well, in his United Farm Workers initiatives to draw attention to the toxins that were being sprayed on farm workers in California, are examples of NEPA being introduced by Congress. And one of the things that, first things that resulted from this federal legislation was a creation of a federal agency that would oversee environmental protection. The EPA, right, the Environmental Protection Agency, resulted from the NEPA, right? Soon after the Environmental Protection Agency was created, we saw Congress pass legislation in the Clean Water Act, following suit with the Clean